I'd like to welcome you all to Mars today for our session, New Models of Innovation in Life Sciences. My name is John McCulloch. I'm a Senior Advisor in Life Sciences and Healthcare here at Mars. And for those of you who don't know, Mars is a not-for-profit innovation centre. We help emerging companies here in Ontario develop the best of Canadian science and technology to build what we hope will be great companies, the great companies of tomorrow. Interestingly, one of the things that we've come across, and I would say especially about 2 years ago when we held the Mars Future of Medicine annual conference, is the increasing importance of new models of innovation in the life sciences. The historic model has always been very, very closed, or the proprietary model, but there are a variety of reasons why that model is starting to show a few cracks, I would say, but we'll get into that in much more detail with our speakers today. So I would like, if I can, to invite the speakers to come up to the podium. As the speakers are coming up here, I will introduce to you a little bit about their background. So first of all, to my right, your left, is Michael May. Michael May is the CEO for the Centre for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine. Michael is the CCRM is a Canadian federally incorporated not-for-profit organization dedicated to supporting the development of foundational technologies that accelerate the commercialization of stem cell and biomaterials-based technologies. Prior to CCRM, Michael was the President and Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Remon Therapeutics Limited, a Toronto-based regenerative medicine company developing novel medical polymers with drug-like activity. Dr. May completed his PhD in chemical engineering at the University of Toronto in 1998 as an NSERC scholar and was awarded the Martin Walmsley Fellowship for Technological Entrepreneurship. Michael sits on a number of boards and advisory committees, including Mars Innovation, Remon Therapeutics, 2020 Vision, the Advanced Regenerative Tissue Engineering Centre, the Department of Chemical Engineering and Applied Chemistry, and the University of Toronto and McMaster Mohawk Biotechnology Programme. Immediately to Michael's left is Niall Wallace. Niall Wallace is the co-founder and CEO of Infonaut. Mr. Wallace has developed deep expertise in innovative web-based visualization platforms that use the power of ultra-accurate and real-time indoor location technology and location-based business intelligence systems. Infonaut's product, Hospital Watch Live, harnesses this expertise to provide a patient safety solution that helps save lives and money through superior infection control and disease surveillance. Mr. Wallace also participates in a variety of federal and provincial boards and advisory groups, including ITAC Health, in which case he's a federal board member, ITAC Ontario, also a board member, Polytechnics Canada's National Strategy Group, and George Brown College Innovation Advisory Board. Our next speaker is Dr. Aled Edwards, Director and CEO of the Structural Genomics Consortium. Aled is a Banbury Professor of Medical Research at the University of Toronto, Visiting Professor of Chemical Biology at the University of Oxford, and Chief Executive of the Structural Genomics Consortium, an Anglo-Canadian-Swedish public-private partnership created to increase substantially the number of protein structures of relevance to human health available in the public domain without restriction on use. Dr. Edwards believes that the discovery of new medicines would be most efficiently accomplished by performing many aspects of drug discovery research, from discovery to clinical proof of concept, within pre-competitive research consortia. You may be wondering about our invisible other speaker. He's at the back. Oh, in the house. Great. He's just getting mic'd up, ladies and gentlemen. You'll get the visual in a minute. But our fourth speaker is Mr. Mark Lundy, Director of R&D of Pfizer Canada. Mark is the Director of R&D for Ontario for Pfizer Canada, a role he has held since 2006. Prior to joining industry, Mark graduated with a PhD in pharmacology and toxicology from Queen's University in Kingston in 1995 and worked as Director of Clinical Research at the Allergy Division of the Kingston General Hospital. In 1997, he joined Pfizer, initially as a clinical scientist, then held subsequent positions as Associate Director of Clinical Research, Team Leader for Regional and Medical Research Specialists, and Director of Medical Affairs. Now, please, up you come, Mark. The way it's going to work, we're going to have each of the speakers give a brief presentation to let you know a little bit more about them, their organization, and I would say also how the concept of open innovation or new models of innovation impacts them. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion on certain topics, and then it'll be your turn. We'll be opening the event to Q&A from the audience, so please think carefully about your questions as we go along. So first, we're going to start with a presentation by Michael May from CCRM.
Thanks, John, and thanks for the opportunity to come here this morning and start things off. An opportunity to introduce CCRM to many of you. CCRM is just recently funded and really only a few weeks old, but certainly is part of an evolutionary process right in the center of this concept of open innovation. But I thought I would start my talk by giving you my thoughts on open innovation. I think there are lots of different definitions of it, so the basic idea here is I don't think open innovation is really that new. And my definition is the development of technology that meets some sort of environmental stress or need done in a collaborative environment where the output is a non-zero-sum gain. So everyone involved benefits from that. And of course, the results of that are put into developing further collaboration, having people work together in more innovative ways and more complex ways to develop not only technologies that enable that, but information technologies. And really this has been going on since the first hunter-gatherer and a number of families decided to assemble on the side of a river, and the river became the first version of the internet, and the fishing net that they invented became a way to accumulate fish that they could trade with other people down the river. So open innovation, in my mind, is not new. If you want to read a good book by Robert Wright called Non-Zero, The Logic of Human Destiny, he would say that open innovation like this, or non-zero-sum gain activity, is inherent in humans and has happened throughout history and has driven us to today. But he would also say that it's very, very important that we have zero-sum gain activities as well. And I think this plays into the discussion about innovation, is that you also need competition. The tribal leader will ultimately, at some point in time when there's enough wealth, decide just to go take things away from other people in terms of war, as opposed to innovating. And that zero-sum gain activity is very important to stressing the environment and driving the next stage of innovation in this collaborative form. And I don't think it's surprising that in an environment, in a business, life sciences, where there are a lot of zero-sum gain activities, mergers and acquisitions, one company having IP, one company not, one company taking market share away from another company, that there are winners and losers and therefore zero-sum gain activities. And that in that environment with kind of a dearth of technology that supports that business model, but an explosion of technologies that enhance collaboration and communication, that we're not sitting here today talking about open innovation. It's time for that part of this process to drive the innovation in this system. The CCRM is really part of an evolution, and I think it results from a funding environment and also the environment that exists here. So we all know that basic R&D and its funding in Canada has resulted in excellent academic impact. But this, in the last few years, there have been a number of collaborative grants that have tried to bring industry together with academia. And in a lot of versions of these, the work is done in the academic environment, and the industrial support is very, very soft. And I think this has created systems where there's technology push, and where the impact on industry, although there's an introduction of industry to academia, the impact on industry has been minimal. In the last few years, in almost a very strategic way, the Canadian government has created these networks of centers of excellence. And an example in regenerative medicine, which is really the combination of stem cell technologies, biomaterials technologies, and bioengineering, and the creation of the stem cell network has created a real environment of collaboration in this industry. And that, combined with investment in infrastructure, has set the stage for the funding agency that funds us, which is called the CSER program, the Centers of Excellence for Commercialization and Research. But CCRM is not the first CSER in the community. Mars Innovation, and I'm on the board of Mars Innovation, which is in this building, where there is collaboration and convergence and a number of stakeholders coming together. Mars Innovation was created bringing together 16 institutions and consolidating their management of IP and tech transfer in a single office. And although there are a number of ways that Mars Innovation strategically is trying to take advantage of that, it still exists that the IP flowing in is at a relatively early stage. And so we need to create partnerships, networks, capital-efficient ways to actually move that technology forward so that we're not creating companies prematurely, but we're actually adding value to it. And Mars Innovation's approach and the community's approach has been obviously to focus on areas of excellence in the community, and regenerative medicine is one of those areas of excellence, and CCRM is a direct evolution of creating a translational research center to move technology forward in this area. So the mission of CCRM is to be a global nexus for regenerative medicine technology, development, and commercialization. And the mission is to bridge that pit of hell, valley of death, whatever you want to call it, a place I've lived far too long, by leveraging that infrastructure investment and funding investment over the past few years, and to bring together the excellence in science we have with excellence in business that we need to bring into the community to translate technologies. And the specific focus area for CCRM is on product development and bottlenecks that we've identified in product development with industry. So our plan to bridge this gap is really in three strategic thrusts. The first one, and at the core of CCRM, is to create out of the infrastructure three product development platforms to enable product development, to integrate science and business by bringing business leaders into the community. And I think most importantly, it's last, but I think most important is creating meaningful links to industry and engaging industry so that we're balancing the technology push that we're also comfortable with in this environment with that market pull. This is an asset map of CCRM. It was created in partnership with Mars Innovation with 6 institutions here in Toronto, including McMaster University in Hamilton and the Ottawa Health Research Institutes. Those institutions represent about 90+% of all the activity in Ontario in stem cell biology, bioengineering, and biomaterials. And with a number of key leaders, all very successful and well-funded, who want to see their intellectual property moving forward, have created these 3 product development platforms. Those platforms are, the first one is a cell reprogramming facility, so really it's about the generation of stem cells. That leads into the second platform, which is a manufacturing platform. The objective here is to generate clinical and commercial quantities of differentiated cells from the the disease-specific and patient-specific cell bank created in the first platform. And the third platform is a biomaterials and tissue mimetics platform, which takes those cells, integrates them with biomaterials to create new drug screens out of human cells, and of course, a long time in the future, cell-based therapies. You can see from this asset map that we have integrated business leadership, a number of partners in a very collaborative environment, and again, most importantly, an industry consortium that is starting out with 16 companies representing all aspects of the regenerative medicine business. The ultimate output being enabling technologies and new startup companies. This collaborative environment that has been put together to create CCRM is further enhanced by an invitation of CCRM to join an international coalition of translational research centers. So CCRM is taking a leadership role with centers from Europe, the US, and Canada to create a further level of collaboration among these centers that have all different areas of expertise, some in clinical translation, others around specific technologies, and CCRM very, very uniquely in the product development space. And again, that's built, and the theme here is collaboration, is on the back of the Stem Cell Network, which is the network of academics in Canada in the stem cell space, taking a leadership role in creating a consortium of all the networks for stem cells globally. So we are creating a collaborative environment where there's a very strong flow of intellectual property and ideas to have regenerative medicine enable industry and create an industry founded in Canada very, very strongly. So take you back to, and of course this slide is about our alignment with our industry partners, which is very, very important. But taking you back to that first slide, how do we focus our efforts on the non-zero-sum gain part of this process, where we believe through collaboration we can enhance the industry most significantly? I think we have to show that our process, our platforms, and what we've set up is capital efficient, so that right off the bat our industry partners see that there is that non-zero-sum gain from day one. But of course, to stay out of the zero-sum gain, I think it's important to understand and define where the pre-competitive, competitive transition is, so that you can focus on enhancing the industry as a whole in a pre-competitive environment, which I think is much more suited to this open innovation, and I think we'll get more into that as we go. So I'll leave it at that and welcome any questions, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, well, thank you very much. My name's Niall Wallace. I'm CEO of Infonaut. We're a company that's based in Toronto and focused on solving the problem of superbugs in hospitals and really bringing evidence base to infection control for the first time. In the interest of full disclosure, I really didn't know what open innovation was until a couple of months until I was asked to comment on it. And then, looking at the definitions, I said, hey, that's me. It looks like I'm involved in open innovation. And it's an interesting approach that we really came to via the trenches. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about today are really the lessons from the trenches, realizing I was involved in an open innovation approach, maybe not a typical one, but actually have a lot of lessons learned from that approach and are still in that lesson learning. I'm probably... Out of the group at the front, we really, Infonaut, put the S in small, medium enterprise. We're a group of 7 dedicated professionals trying to make a difference in the world on a global stage, and have really taken ourselves from a successful consulting company and thrown us into the startup because consulting wasn't getting us out of bed in the morning. Building solutions and making a difference was. With that, just a little bit more about what we do. I guess we leverage a very complex platform to solve a very complex problem inside very complex organizations being hospitals. So I'm involved in a very complex game. Looking back when we started the journey a little while ago, I don't think we realized what we were getting into, but we're certainly loving the ride and the experiences that are bringing. But we're certainly doing something in the market, something nobody else has done before. And when we explain to our clients and partners what we're doing, there's a little bit of head scratching until they come around. But the partners that we've identified and are working with, we're really the first people to get it. And I would say that the industry got it before academia and even clients. And so that has driven a lot of the relationships that we've developed. And to talk about innovation, there's two areas of this definition around open innovation that I'd like to comment on to start with, sort of at a very high level. Being in the trenches, innovation for me is really about end stage commercialization. Innovation doesn't really happen for us until somebody writes a check for what we're doing. Up until that point, we're in R&D. There's lots of R&D going on. I think everybody recognizes that the R&D that is happening and not getting out into the marketplace is one of the problems that Ontario, Canada, and the world really is trying to overcome. And organizations like Mars are very focused on that, helping you through that end stage. But in the definition of innovation, when I'm talking to innovation, to policymakers, to partners, we really have to be focused on the end stage of that, which is getting a check from a client. Up until then, we're a little cottage industry of research and development. There's lots of that going on. And us staying in that world isn't really helping us with our goals and isn't helping our clients. And ultimately, what we're focused on is patient safety and the public. The second sort of clarification around innovation that we've come to realize is the difference between incremental and disruptive. And I think it's really the role of a small company to play in this ecosystem. Large companies, I believe, are very good at incremental innovation. The 3 to 5% improvements, the better machines, slightly cheaper rack rates. All of that happens in the normal course of business within large and medium-sized companies. I think they're very good at that. But they're also really good at identifying disruptive innovation that has been developed and sort of percolated from the bottom. And that's what we're trying to do, is develop a really disruptive approach to what I said was a very complex problem. And not make that 3 to 5% difference, but make the 50, 75, 80% difference with a mission statement about stopping the problem that we're trying to address. And so I think understanding innovation from those two perspectives is very important. And it's really important to understand the roles that companies like myself are involved in that innovation ecosystem, where we're really trying to bring disruptive innovation to the market and then leverage partners that are more used to working in an innovation space that is incremental. And we are targeting healthcare, which has a lot of challenges in Ontario and Canada, around the world, about making it affordable or sustainable depending on the model, while increasing accessibility, quality, and safety. And this makes healthcare a ripe sector for disruptive innovation. And so when we do a sort of early market analysis, is, hey, we're onto something, the industry really needs us, let's move forward with that. But it hasn't always been quite so clean. Now we come to open innovation by way of necessity. We're dealing with what I said, a very complex problem, fairly complex solution, sophisticated and complex buying organizations, and for what we've identified to do what we want to do on a global scale, very complex partners. And so a number of things have really driven me into the open innovation world. And the first is that rather than develop everything from scratch, our way forward is really a convergent solution. Let's leverage technologies that typically haven't worked together in the past and are certainly not built to address the problem we're tackling, and make them work together in that environment. So that immediately requires me to deal with a number of partners or suppliers in that chain. And so our technology stack uses a number of different components, enterprise level components from Microsoft, from Dell, from ESRI, from Cisco, all global companies with a global footprint that are already selling these into the market and are looking for new ways to open up different markets that they probably haven't thought of before. And when we start engaging with these partners, we look for aligned values. The first meeting I had with Dell, very senior people, the first words out of their mouth were alignment of business values and business opportunities. And so they were taking a very kind of not now approach to it, but how does this impact me in the immediate future? And all of our partners in the private sector have asked similar questions, some with more sophistication than others. In the academia world, everybody that we're dealing with has an innovation platform, and so they're looking at alignment there and saying, can we work with a small company with an unproven technology, really forward what we're trying to do as an academic organization, bring interesting problems to the faculty and students, train them for the technologies of tomorrow, and then advance the culture of innovation by offering unique challenges that we can throw some very smart people at, and really encourage people to come into the school and then find jobs. And with clients, we found the same approach, and even government, because in the healthcare sector, in a single payer model, eventually the money that comes to you is going to come from a single source. And so we realized that working with government as a partner, whether they're agencies, not-for-profits that receive their funding through government, is a very important approach. And this has done a number of things for us. First, it is crossing the chasm, but it's almost pre-crossing the chasm. To engage these partners, you really have to be able to sell the idea and sell the vision and look for the innovation adopters within these partners that are going to help carry you forward. That, for us, also acts as a confirmation of the path and the vision that we have as a company. We're doing something that's fairly crazy and that not many people get right away. So the feedback loop within that, because we're dealing with very smart people that know the industry very well and are going to take a very analytical view of how our partnership is going to emerge, is very important for us. It really did confirm what we were onto, and when you gain some momentum by having these big players behind you, that really helps push it forward. But realizing in this, and it's vision, not Vison, we had to maintain the vision throughout the whole period of that time. We were the ones that knew what we were doing, knew what we were about. Everybody would take a fairly detailed interest in what we were doing. But to maintain that, we really had to focus on what we were doing, what we were delivering to the partners in this open innovation loop, and drive that forward and make sure that they were aware of what we were doing and how we were progressing. But then it always fell back to, while you're involved in these partnerships, you really have to get her done. And I think that there's myself and my peers, when you sign some of these deals with large companies, there's like, hey, we hit a huge milestone, you can kind of wipe our brow and take a bit of a breather. And I don't think that's the case. All that does is kind of build momentum that shows you're on the right path. It's still up to the main partner in that group to drive the vision forward and leverage what you can from the other partners, realizing where all the alignment's happening. And so those are, I think, are very important lessons for us as we did move forward. The partners that we have been able to develop have been very important in what we're doing. And I said we didn't really realize we were in an open innovation environment until we'd entered it. But our strategy going forward, really as a small company and trying to get that end stage commercialization, our strategy has been standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's how do we leverage the community around us that we have built up to open up markets and open up sales for our solution. And so that has been a very, I think, important lesson going forward. And then the realization that you are in that open innovation loop and you have a reliance on these partners going forward sort of happened after the fact, but it certainly wasn't by design. Thank you very much.
Speaker will be Alan Edwards.
So I thought it probably more helpful that I walk you through a case study rather than tell you what it is and you'll figure it out. So I direct a public-private partnership, and one of our main tenets is we never take a patent. And so we were founded in 2003 by the Wellcome Trust and pharmaceutical companies and the Canadian and Ontario governments. And our mission is to take knowledge about human proteins and put them into the public domain without restriction. The reagents go into the public domain, our results go into the public domain. We never file for IP. And now we're responsible for 30% of the global output of human protein structures every year. And in addition to that, we publish 2 papers per week. This is a true definition of a public-private partnership. Over the course of the decade that we will and have been in existence, we will have been funded by over $300 million of research funding. A quarter of that comes from the pharmaceutical industry. So we're a charity. Remember, they get no proprietary knowledge, they get no patents, and they get no first rights to look before we release it to the public. So if you do something of value and that's necessary to the industry, industry will pay for it and will participate. And I'd like to thank Ontario and Canada for helping out. The industrial focus, if you're talking to your partners, it really helps you understand the market. And so of some of our scientists, 65 have gone on to jobs in academia. And this is a year-old data. That's why I put the greater than, because I can't really remember. But we had over 33 of our scientists move on to positions in industry, 9 to director positions or above, and some went back to business school. And of course, we're at an academic. We have part of our mandate is academia. So we train scientists from industry and academia who can come into the SGC and work for a month to 6 months to a year. And we've trained so far well over 200 scientists from other organizations that just come in. Because we take no patents, we don't have to do any legal agreements, and that really facilitates collaboration. The understanding is with whomever we collaborate that it's going to go into the public domain. We're not going to file a patent. It took 10 seconds to get that agreement. No MTAs, no anything, and away we go. And we have ongoing sort of a book of over 200 collaborations with defined objectives and defined outcomes. That's with both companies and academics. We have about more than now, 250 publications. Again, this is a year old. But on every one of our papers, we have 3 non-SGC scientists on average on it, showing the power of working within networks, as it were, where you predefine yourselves to be open. Of course, the collaborations are focused in the geographical areas. So Canada has a super large circle. So this is the circles are the size of the number of collaborations we have. And obviously near our labs in Sweden and Oxford and Toronto are disproportionately large circles for the research activity in those countries. Because again, you have close interactions with industry, over the last 3 years, and this is again up until last summer, we attend conferences as speakers, mostly in the area of drug discovery. We serve on SABs of biotechs, consortia, funding agencies. We have face-to-face, and about 50 times we meet face-to-face with large pharma every year. I mean, at my level, the heads of R&D. And more than, again, the workshops, that's not trainees. We hold sort of dedicated 2-week workshops, let's say chemical screening or protein production or protein crystallization. And scientists come in for a week, and we've got a fairly sort of standard way in which we run that course. So those are courses. Again, because we're collaborate in an open environment, companies, small companies, and that's at the bottom, small companies can come to us for a collaboration, understanding that all the results will go into the public domain, but they can make use of cool science to put in their marketing material. Now, we don't mind. I mean, we get to use their technology, we get to do cool experiments, they get to publish it. And they like this because if the smaller companies usually don't get access to high quality science to test their machines or their new techniques. So if we think the thing has legs, we set up these collaborations. The agreement up front is no IP. The companies like it because they get to publish it, and that, of course, that turns into marketing material for them. We like it because we get to check out cool new things. There's no disconnect between commercialization and open access and no patents. So as you know, probably from the literature, there's about 70% of startup companies from universities start without a patent. So the companies that we founded, Harbinger Biotech, commercializes some of the machines that we've invented, and they've had a steady stream of 2 to 5 to 8 people, depending on the business cycle over the last 5 years. We've distributed our software for free. 1 Degree Bio was found, that's Harbinger's an Ontario company. 1 Degree Bio has just started, and they're going to be hopefully announcing their first round of financing in the next 2 months. And that was, that's a platform company that enables people to share their results on antibodies Again, it's an open access company. So there's lots of commercialization opportunities that build on open access and facilitate the sharing part. You just got to have your nose for and sense it. Well, there's another company we have here that I'm not going to tell you about for 3 months. The fun thing about this is pushing the pre-competitive barrier. And as you heard earlier, I believe it should all be in clinical proof of concept because that's very logical. The industry's in big trouble, right? Last year, 70,000 pharma employees were let go. The average R&D investment per annum in pharma of $100 billion, 7 completely novel medicines were generated last year. And of course, that's a trend that since 1950s, more R&D spending, fewer drugs per medicine, and it's not sustainable. So this is born out of necessity. And so we've moved the pre-competitive area to medicinal chemistry. We're making chemical tools that before one would have patented. They have far more value in the public domain. We have pharmaceutical chemists, Lilly, Pfizer, GSK, Novartis, donating med chemists to us to generate new molecules that are highly well characterized, and we put them into the public domain without restriction. And here's an example of one such project. In January 2010, in the patent literature, we noticed a compound from Mitsubishi that looked kind of interesting. And so in collaboration with Jay Bradner, so this is Stefan Knapp at our lab in Oxford and Jay Bradner at the Dana-Farber, they said, let's make a tool compound to one of the bromo domains, which is a human protein. They started the project in January 2010. The chemistry was done by February. It was an agreement, we're not going to patent anything, so therefore all the Harvard lawyers and Dana-Farber lawyers got out of the way. All the Oxford lawyers got out of the way. We were able to take advantage of all the facilities at Oxford and Harvard. We went to the mouse facility. We published a paper in Nature in September 2010. It's a beautiful story. It's a highly selective molecule for the BET family. It works in xenografts. It works in patient explants. This is 3 companies have started HTS campaigns based on the knowledge. There's been a biotech company founded on it already. And we've given that compound, without restriction, no MTAs, to over 250 labs in 3 months. So this compound is going to go out there and increase the knowledge about this area of science and hopefully facilitate and spur more competitive activity in that area. So I thought that that would be most helpful rather than wax poetic about openness, just to show you what can happen if you play in that world. Thanks.
And our next speaker is Mark Lundy.
First of all, my apologies to yourselves and to the faculty and to the organizers for being late. I do apologize. Just want to provide actually a quick overview, first of all, pictorially of what Al had mentioned. On the curve here, what you can see is the global pharma investment in R&D. So this is looking at it from a purely pharmaceutical perspective. What the green bars represent per year is the number of new drugs that have been approved. And as you can see, there's a disconnect there. We're increasing investment, and we're not increasing our productivity or our output. The challenge comes, and Michael mentioned it, when does a stressor come? As an industry, we put about 25% of global income back into R&D, a significant portion. And we've been increasing. We've been throwing money at the same model, hoping for better results. As you know, there's a lot of patent cliffs right now. In Pfizer, we do about $10 billion last year in R&D. We'll be doing $6 billion next year because of our loss of income from drugs like Lipitor and Norvasc. So that becomes a stressor for us. We can't keep just investing in the same model. And the old model we had was closed innovation. It was as soon as an idea is recognized, as soon as a potential target is recognized, gather around the wagons, everybody stays inside their own pharma shop and tries to develop their own novel compounds for it and does their own biology and their own optimization programs with as little as possible sharing in the external community. Obviously, we need to do things differently because that model hasn't been very productive in the last decade. So this is just a quote from our CEO or our ex-CEO as of Christmas time, really saying from a top level from Pfizer, and you hear this from all the other companies as well, that there's an increased recognition that we need to do external partnerships. That's one thing to say it at a visionary level, becomes very different. How do you impact that? How do you make that happen on a pragmatic level? So As I mentioned, we had major stressors coming up in terms of loss of patents and therefore reduced R&D budgets. And so we reached out, and a little bit of sarcasm in the writer's title here, to academia to partner in a different way again. So we've tried different versions of these models. This latest one is called the Centers for Therapeutic Innovation. And the first one was started last November with UCSF and $85 million over 5 years. What's a little bit different between, and since then there will be 10 in the US, and then we're going to look to expand globally to other areas. What's a little bit different about these partnerships for us is in the past we've done large academia industry partnerships, and in a very traditional sense. What's different with these, we're actually taking our scientists and our facilities and we're embedding them in the institution. And we're actually shutting down or closing down our own R&D facilities. So we're truly externalizing, as Al had said, the remnants of our scientific force to working right directly with the academic community. Access to our tools, access to our knowledge, access to all the funding possible too. So it is a true push out of our internal funding to external centers. Very early to tell, this is a brand new approach for us. Is it the right model? We don't know yet. The other area, and I think that areas like the SGC make optimal sense for industry going forward, is, well, why was pharma ever being competitive around discovery biology? So in the past, it was very much, all the major pharmas are running competitive programs in the discovery biology, not in the drug development phase, prior to drug development. So these are just some headlines around one initiative that's in Asia, where Pfizer, Lilly, and Merck are banding together to work with the community to have a biology program in oncology discovery, basic biology discovery. So in Canada, we've had dabbled in this area for a while, and it really is, it was mentioned a few times today by the other speakers, we wouldn't be able to have experienced some practical aspects of open innovation, of partnership in a different way, if it wasn't for academic leadership and government at the federal and provincial level leadership in creating opportunities either through funding programs or through consortia that make sense to partner with and provide, not from Pfizer Canada perspective, but for Pfizer Global, something unique that they can't find to the same extent somewhere else in the world. So the Centers of Excellence in Commercialization and Research, we've partnered with 5 of those at a fairly major level. Quebec Pain Research is a novel a consortium funded out of the FRSQ in Quebec. Ontario Institute of Cancer Research, obviously right here in the Mars facility. We have a partnership with those, Center for Drug Research and Development out of British Columbia. And then with the SGC and the CQDM, what you'll see, what's different with all these are all open innovation to different aspects of it. So open innovation, in a sense, it means that IP or ideas or information can flow freely. So in some of these, there is that aspect. So obviously in the Structural Genomic Consortium, which Al had mentioned, it's very open. In the sense that there is no IP positions, everything's put in the public realm right away. In other ones, there are IP positions, but the IP position is maybe taken by the inventor of the IP, and it's just a sharing back and forth, or Pfizer's providing tools or providing private information back and forth. So it's a limited open innovation, if you will. But the sense is that in all of these, what we've found in order to try and drive recognition, and my role, I should mention, the same with myself, my peers in other pharma, is to really go out and try and attract our global dollars here. So to try and get as much of that shrinking R&D budget to be invested in Canada as possible. And really what we need to be able to sell the opportunity here in Canada, world-class science is number one. If you don't have the world-class science, it's not a platform that we're going to be able to leverage very equivalently, because other areas of the world, it's now very open to look for that. Having said that, even in somewhere where there's incredibly good science, the competition globally for those R&D dollars is increasing. And where we find that we can play a role as a local affiliate is we use our seed money. We use Pfizer Canada money to start the program quite often, to put some money in to help get Global's attention to come here versus go look at colleagues in Pfizer Sweden, Pfizer India, Pfizer Japan. And then the other area that is very helpful is, as I mentioned earlier, where there's a public sector amplifier of funding. So where public sector is putting money in and creating the right opportunities to attract scientists, to build research consortia, those help raise the profile of the opportunity here. So in the future, I think obviously we don't know if this is this a true paradigm shift from the pharmaceutical sector to open innovation and to a completely different way of working in the past, or is it just a pendulum swinging and maybe it's, it's going far and towards the open innovation, maybe it'll come back more. Time will tell, but obviously Ontario and Canada are very well positioned with the leadership they have here and with the federal and provincial programs they have here to play a role in public-private partnerships in a major way with the pharmaceutical industry. The caveat of that, I think it's a very different model than in the past where there was granting opportunities, and that now in the public-private partnership, the public funding aspect of it, or the public support aspect of it, through different mechanisms of tax and so on, needs to be maintained. So if the public sector starts it and then pulls out, then the attractiveness to industry becomes less on a global basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, just before we start the panel discussion, I would like to point something out. We have a white paper entitled New Models of Innovation in Life Sciences. The spearhead for that was Hadi Salah. Hadi, you want to stand for a second? Just to embarrass you publicly. There we go. And it features the input from our distinguished faculty here. So please check out that report on marsdd.com. You'll find it there. In fact, if you like, you can actually read it as we're having the event, if you have your laptop with you. Now, on to the panel discussion. I think it was very clear that all of our speakers have a definite stake in new models of innovation, and particularly open innovation, whether it's development of drugs, the effective development of regenerative medicine, or better healthcare IT solutions in a medical setting. But the first question I'd like to put to the panel is, it sounds like you're all sold on the idea. There's no doubt about that. But is it true that there's an increasing adoption of a more open model? And why would you think that is primarily? I think obviously we heard that in terms of R&D productivity in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a rather troubling gap between dollars in and drugs out. But I'd like to get each of your views. So, Michael?
So, I mean, I think it's been described, but, there are certain stresses there. There are certain, the costs are going up, the pipeline is going down. And so, according to my couple of initial slides, I would say it's natural that collaboration would be the way to go to solve these problems. But I think one other aspect of this is that the global tools for collaboration, the communications tools over the last 10, 20 years have enhanced. So I think in some sense that kind of global village and the tools associated with it are almost pulling industries along with it, making collaboration much easier. So that's an added point to what's already been described.
Niall?
Well, for me, I think a lot of our partners have recognized the value of innovation in what they do and realized that they're perhaps not being as innovative as they can be. And so the chance to align with somebody that's using their technology or services is a very attractive value proposition for them. And for us as well, I think, again, I am very focused on the sales. And so a small company going into a hospital saying, we're going to put these things all over your hospital. We're going to sort of install some servers. Your patients and your staff are going to wear these tags as they walk around. We're going to monitor everything that moves. And, one of the outputs is that we're going to make your hospital safer. And, well, ask me how that works so far.
How does it work so far?
Not very well. But by bringing a Dell or a Microsoft to the table that has experience in fulfillment, installations, large contracts, working with very senior executive people on visions of transformation of health services really kind of bolsters the conversations that I can have and really reduces the risk to everybody involved, myself included, while opening up new opportunities for ourselves and our partners. And another thing I found too is it really brings a different perspective to the table. And just one of the things that we've done, we've managed to engage some of the insurance companies that have huge liabilities because everybody in the States and Canada as well are suing them because they get sick inside of a hospital. And when you're starting to talk to them about what you're doing and where you all fit in the ecosystem, they start referring to you as an insurance product. And that sort of, causes some head scratches on our side at the beginning. But then, it brings a different perspective to the table. And you're going, oh, hey, maybe we do fit into that envelope. And that is actually a better value proposition for the clients because we're preventing lawsuits and increase of premiums. So yeah, maybe you start referring to yourself as an insurance-based product. And so those are some of the outcomes and learnings that you get when you're involved in those types of collaborations and have those open discussions between yourselves and your partners.
Alan?
Well, it has to happen. I mean, all industries have done it. The airline industry did this. Semiconductor industry did this. And this industry is even in worse shape. And so they're competing on R&D that fails 9 out of 10 times. It's just idiocy. And so, if we get a clear understanding of human biology, everyone's going to be more profitable. And the most cost-effective way to do that is to do it in partnership. Everyone realizes the only people who are pushing back are the people inside industry, usually at a sort of mid-management and above level, and below VP though, because they're going to lose their jobs and they're uncomfortable. But it's going to happen. They're losing their jobs anyway, but they're pretending it's not happening.
Alan, just one other related point. You believe that the pre-competitive boundary should actually be at the clinical stage. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So, if you just sort of look at the failure rates through the process, the largest drop for truly innovative, novel medicines, not for Me Too's, are at the phase 2A, wherever you achieve the clinical proof of concept that your targeted mechanism is working. And so if you define R&D by risk, that's where the risk ends. And if you made, if all pharma competed on clinically validated targets, they become probably 80% more profitable. And so we have a movement afoot to try and push that boundary to there. Again, it makes sense if you just look at the sort of attrition rates and how much money goes into each place. It's probably about $12 to $15 billion a year spent by pharma that's wasted on repetitive research.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
So, fully agree. I think the other part I'll just may not have been clear in the discussion so far is one of the pushes to go towards pre-competitive isn't the fact just that the model's broken and we can't keep funding the same model, and that we want access to the best scientists to work with our scientists and to fully utilize all the tools. It's cheaper. So if Pfizer, Merck, and Lilly and GSK share the cost of it with the public funding system, instead of paying, debatable $500 million to $1 billion per drug development, and if we say, $500 million up to the phase 2 level, it'll cost us $100 million to get to that point. And then, as Alan said, if the competition starts there, your security on your $100 million investment is a lot greater than the risk you had on the $500 million up to that point by going alone. So from that sense, it just has to happen economically. It's a smarter way to drive this industry.
But also, by doing the discovery and early stage development as a consortium, it means that your competitors know exactly the same that you do. Is that a concern?
So there's a lot of things around in terms of IP and that all would have to be worked out. There's no doubt about it, and how you take IP position on it. But when you've got a compound out of a discovery lab, to take it to a druggable compound is a very big step. And so certainly you can see there from a chemistry perspective, you can differentiate yourself. And if you look at the number of, when you look at a new therapeutic area that's all of a sudden opening up in itself, and just about every pharma company has a compound within 6 months or a year of each other. So the competition right now in our current model is not that black and white that one company has a leap light years over the other company. We're very, as the biology evolves, everybody jumps on the same science at the same time. And you just hope along the way that you've done a better development program or a better optimization of a candidate program to come up with a compound that has more impact on the target and less side effects along the way. So I don't think in the current model the competitive part of it is is advantageous as we may believe.
Okay, good. I would like to ask the panel if they could cite some examples of successes from using an open innovation model, and maybe also related to that, if there is any any evidence to point to the outcomes themselves using this methodology versus the old closed shop system are actually better. Michael.
So I'm going to use an example outside of the area, but from someone who supports regenerative medicine, and that's Robert McEwen of the McEwen Center for Regenerative Medicine here. The mining industry was a very closed industry as well, particularly with the data associated with their core samples. And he's quoted in books and visits the White House to talk about open innovation based on a contest that he had where he opened up all of his data at his mining company to the world and asked anybody or everyone to find a way to extract that gold and to extract it at the lowest possible cost. And the result was astounding. Thousands of people participated, and his company became the lowest producer of gold in the world at about, I think, $67 an ounce. And if you know what gold is worth now, that's a nice business. What I find interesting about that is that at the end of the day, everyone knew who owned the gold and who was benefiting from it. So there was this transition, obviously, to a competitive environment. But I think that's a great example of an open innovation system that had a very tangible result for an industry that was very closed.
Well, for us, I mean, we brought a product to market, I think, which was a huge challenge to overcome itself, and certainly relied on the partners and researchers that we had to be able to overcome all the technical problems, feasibility, and bring it to market and prove that it does work. That in itself has driven a lot of visibility. Sales funnel development, which is a natural outcome, I think, for everybody that was originally involved. With some early successes, I think sort of the full outcome is still TBD. So it's one of these, stay tuned to see how well we're able to make the model work. But we certainly wouldn't be where we were today if we had chosen to keep things closed and tackle all the problems ourselves. And we wouldn't be in the position to move forward in the market and take that global view. And be able to think big if it was just, the seven of us kind of working in a shop somewhere trying to do it ourselves.
I think you can point to individual successes, but it's pretty important to know that industry, the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, is quite reticent to get into them. I mean, that's why they make the news. And they make the news, when they form, and you don't often hear them make the news at their successes. And so there are a lot of downsides to running these things because they're out of the comfort zone of how people normally work with one another. Frankly, many of them don't deliver. Why the joke on Pfizer joining these research alliances with academia, they've done it in the past, and after every single one, most pharmaceutical companies say, well, that wasn't worth it. And yet they keep doing it because they don't know what to do it better. And they have a justifiable case that consortia don't work either. I mean, we're an exception, but there's a lot of barriers based on evidence that these things are tough to get right. But when they do get right, they do work, as you guys suggest. But there's still a lot of learning on how to actually operationalize the ideas.
And so, similarly, it's too early for us to know from a Pfizer perspective whether or not this shift in our funding is going to actually result in a more optimal drug development program. But what we are learning a little bit, and maybe it's jumping a little bit ahead, but we're learning to Alet's comments, is this is a different way of working than we've ever worked before. So even on the partnerships we have in Canada, normally it's come up with some kind of agreement where there's a contract involved, this financial transaction, and then you sit back and wait for a report from your partner. You may have one or two interactions. And what we're finding now that's the most important aspect of these is the two sides really working together. And so that takes a different kind of leadership and a different kind of project management than we've ever seen before from both sides, from the industry side and from the academia side, and also from the public sector, to really put that in the optimal case to work. And I don't know that we've recognized yet what that leadership and what that project management kind of approach to making a successful public-private partnership is. I think in some cases it happens naturally, but the more we can identify those success factors to optimize those partnerships, the better.
It sounds like certainly one aspect of the open model of innovation is like 100 brains are generally better than one. And if you can bring an entire community to a problem rather than a smaller group who are resource constrained, you're more likely to hit a good outcome. However, there's also the saying, hell is other people. So if you establish this community, or this consortium, and there is an issue, a cultural issue perhaps, where there is not a sharing of values between all the stakeholders, it would seem that it may be rather thorny. So I would like to ask you about the culture and the cultural aspects, and particularly I would say the maybe most revealing perhaps would be Mark's comments on this, because coming from a very proprietary, very closed culture to one that's entirely open is a very radical change. But I would say in most cases though, it is definitely an issue that when you have a large number of people involved in the initiative, how they interact will be as much a determination of the outcome as their individual skill. So, Michael, you were at the beginning of one. How do you think about it?
Well, I think so. We're going to have a number of different projects flow through our platforms, sourced from industry and academia, and some of those will be much more open than others. Some will be associated with a single company that wants rights to the IP. Some will be joint development projects where everyone will share the benefits at the end. I think what's important, I'm hoping what's important and what we're planning for, is to have that all decided as much up front so that everyone's expectations are managed. Because I think you're right, managing the people and the expectations will be the main challenge.
Yeah, I mean, a huge lesson learned for us with this is the relationships take time. And when you're cultivating these partnerships, we originally took a very wide view, and we thought it would be beneficial to have as many partners as possible. We quickly realized that all of our time could be spent just nurturing these types of relationships. And so we quickly whittled it down to 4. And I think part of that learning is, it really is, crossing the chasm or pre-chasm. Within these partnerships, you have to find the people that believe in innovation, that are willing to take those risks, those risk adopters. And the ability to, when you make connections and you don't see that, or you're not getting that feedback and it's going to take too much of your time, to quickly move on and realize that you're cutting your losses. But when you find those people within a large organization that's going to be supportive, you really hang on to them, you don't let go. And those are the relationships that you have to nurture and cultivate to be successful as a small company. And so that really was a lesson learned, and that a wide number of partnerships for us really was like herding cats. And we quickly realized that a small company can't do that. There's only so many hours in a day, and that would have taken the focus off everything else. So, that was an important lesson learned.
For us, it's actually the business side's quite simple, quite the easiest side. So it's unique, maybe unique to certain instances, but for us, the buy-in has come from the heads of R&D at all the big organizations. So you have buy-in. The toughest thing to manage is the academic side. And so we overcame that by recruiting to task. We recruited people on the understanding that this is going to be an open project, etc. Many interactions with academia try to coddle together existing labs, and they have their own agendas there. It's not about playing with teams. So remember, we're selected from a young age as academics to be independent, swim against the stream, don't work with anybody, keep your ideas secret. And then all of a sudden these consortia now work together and be happy. And we just don't do that well. And so I think you need to sort of recruit people who buy in, even if they're really smart and you think this is the person I need. If they don't buy in, they're going to be a pain in the you-know-what and tank the project. So.
Can I just jump in there?
Yep.
One of the unique features of CCRM versus the other translation centers is that we are actually sourcing from industry the folks that will conduct the projects in our platform. So we will have our own staff conducting those core projects and then interfacing with academia for work that goes beyond the scope of those platforms. And as part of our plan, we are going to invite industry scientists or product developers to come and operate out of our platform as well. So I think that's another way that we're trying to manage that academic industry friction or potential friction.
Yeah, and on that too, I mean, there is a bit of a warning for small companies that are looking for active academic engagements. Lessons learned from us was when we started working with PhD in our area, I mean, they're taking a 3 to 5 year view of what they're doing, which they should, and they'll try to fit you within their area of study. And so you've really got a very kind of long outlook and a cycle, which is great. But when you're a small company needing to prove yourself in an iterative environment and you're developing on a 3 to 6 month schedule for releases, the alignment with universities is sometimes a little difficult. You've really got to kind of manage that separately. We've had a lot of success engaging with the colleges and polytechnic colleges, which we kind of cheekily refer to as a great finishing school for university graduates. But we get access to great people in that environment that they're really coming to the college to learn some applied research, applied science. And for a small company to engage with those in an innovation agenda, you can get those quicker turnarounds and more immediate wins, which you really have to do while you put some longer vision on the back burner.
Mark, just 1 second. We'll be beginning questions from the audience soon. We have a microphone at the front and at the back. So start preparing yourselves. We'll be kicking off with that in a minute. Mark, sorry, the cultural shift.
Yeah, so I think it's massive. I think what Al had mentioned, it's this what referred to as senior management within pharma, control the budgets. They're the people whose labs, whose careers are going to be dramatically affected by this. The VPs and the CEOs control the vision. They don't control the budget. So those decision makers at a budgetary level are the ones we're asking to give up their shops, to turn around and give their money into different areas, and to work differently. Not something they've had the natural history for, the training for. So there's a big adjustment on the industry side, and the same thing on the academia side. And to be open, as soon as those centers for therapeutic innovation were announced in the U.S. in November, I would say most of the Canadian universities we've interacted with have turned around and said, how do I get myself 80 million? Versus, wow, here's what I have as an offering that we can work together with industry, right? It's so that the old mindset is about how do we build the R&D budgets in academia, how do we hold on to the R&D in industry, and so there is going to be a lot of learning and maybe a generational learning for the younger scientists to come up and take leadership roles in new models.
Except for CCRM.
Yes.
It's important, as you guys may or may not know, when you get into some positions in industry, you measure yourself on the studometer by how many reports you have. And these VPs, I direct an organization of blah, 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 for every dollar they spend externally, they have to reduce one of their internal reports. Yeah. And they don't like that because they measure themselves by how many people report to them. Not everybody, but an awful lot. And if I'm going to fund $1 million to a certain academic lab, I have to fire 3 people in my report. And so you need to, these are kind of the sort of real life cultural issues that you have to overcome to get these kinds of collaborations going. And so you need to get buy-in from many more people inside a company than one person. If you have one point of contact inside a company to do a collaboration, you might as well give up because that person will probably go to another company by the time your deal's done.
In this economic climate, it might be better career-wise for a VP of R&D in pharma to have a smaller number of reports.
Yeah.
And then more friends on Facebook.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, your questions, please. If you'd like to come up to the microphone. Any questions for the panel? Raul.
Hi. I work for Mike, so I'm going to ask questions over on the other side.
Good for you.
Because I can ask you later. So this is primarily directed at Aled and Mark. So in the model, you develop a target, and then there still is about $100 million worth of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 testing that it has to go through. And so wouldn't it make sense maybe to extend the open innovation model to incorporate all of that so that when a molecule is actually ready for market, then the pharma companies who were part of that consortium then compete purely based on how competitive they are in the market?
Where would the pre-competitive barrier stop? After phase 3?
Yeah.
After all the money spent?
Yep.
Who's going to, I don't understand, who's paying for the phase 3 trial?
The consortium of 10 or so pharma companies.
And then they bid for the molecule?
No, they each get to sell it, but then they're competing based on how competitive they are in the market. Because the way your model works right now is you have still have $100 million worth of development that still needs to be done. And so a company
more.
now, say Pfizer, now spends $150 million, but now they can't protect that product. Who's to prevent a generic from coming in and say, okay, well, I can just do the quick and short FDA, biosimilar trial for $10 million, and then sell that. So I'm saying maybe a solution to that is to extend the open innovation model right to the end of the clinical trials so that everyone can compete evenly.
Well, generics can't compete. The regulators have what they call data exclusivity, which means that if you pay for the phase 3 trials, that it's not 100 million, in large, let's say Alzheimer's, it'll be $500 million. Then, and when you start to market your drug, generics can't compete unless they run the trial over again for 5 years in America, 8 in Canada, 10 in EU. And so there are exclusive licensing periods. So that's just a fact check. But to collaborate through phase 3, it sure would be a different business model. The whole profit thing would have to change a little.
And we don't need, what you're saying is an extension of something that's still visionary in its earlier phase. And the earlier phase is, even taking it clinical research on a consortium basis. Even at phase 1, we're not there yet. That's a visionary step. So I think, adding extended onto that maybe would challenge the business side of us maybe a little bit further than we thought yet.
Actually, you need competition. I've just thought of, once you have a target, you even look at the cholesterol transfer CTEP protein that Pfizer's compound. Who'd have thunk it, right? Merck and Pfizer went into the clinic at the same time. You couldn't tell in advance. Pfizer had a great compound, but it showed side effects. Merck's compound looks clean. And so if you want to get better medicines, you need competition somewhere. And I think that's the place to compete. Once you know there's a target, because if 6 companies make medicines to the same target, there are going to be clear differences among them.
Okay, that's true. And it just, I'm sorry, just not to belabor a point, but Lipitor was the 6th statin on the market. So incremental innovation, that's what we had thought. You could look at the other side saying it's a me too. It truly was incremental innovation though. At that time, it had, per milligram, they're at the lower, it had a bigger impact on LDL for a lower dose with the similar side effects to the market statins on the market. So I think you can have around your chemistry, your final chemistry, you can have some added value that gives you a competitive advantage.
Lakshmi, then we'll go to John. Lakshmi?
Hi. Some of the value, if you will, I want to move towards the investor side here. I don't know if there's a right forum, but could someone comment either from the shareholder side or from VC side or angels? I'm talking about hardcore money other than government money. How would those investors feel if something like this comes? And I'd like to perhaps like you to take a long-term view. That is, Pfizer, is here today, tomorrow we don't know. Same applies to all pharma companies, depending on your share values, right? So if this open innovation goes across the spectrum, things like that, how do you see, for example, the share values, which obviously is going to give you the money that you have to funnel into these programs, would happen? And if not, everything is going to collapse, including the marketing regulatory engines that right now bring these things out. Could someone perhaps take a view on that side of the story? Thank you.
Just as the panel is mulling, one thing I would maybe comment is that I think really what's been talked about here in the life sciences perspective, particularly in the therapeutics, is collaboration around the disruptive change, like a new compound, not a new compound, new target, a radically new target, and then have the competitive phase around the incremental part of development, which is, to use the Lipitor analogy, you all know what the starting point is now. You know it's a valid target to go after, but now we're going to compete to get the best solution to attacking that target. Panel members?
I was just going to say the evolution of the translational research centers is in part a response to the lack of funding at the early stages, and to try to find collaborative and capital efficient ways to move technologies forward. Still in an environment where it may not always be open, we do want to drive IP forward and create companies. But on the translational research side, I think there is a model there that is trying to get technologies to truly fundable stages for VCs and investors, looking at it from our side as opposed to the pharma side.
Yeah, no, it's great being on a panel where people are talking about $150 million. Sure beats my $150,000 discussions. From an investor point of view, the way that we're pitching it to investors is it's a way to reduce our risk and reduce the risk of potential investors. We actively go forward and talk about our strategy of standing on the shoulders of giants. You've got massive global companies that already do business with thousands of hospitals around the world. The advantage for them is that they can bring new solutions into that existing market, which is a much easier sell for them. And it opens up markets for us that we wouldn't normally have access to, and it streamlines that process and hopefully shrinks the sales cycle. So we very much look at open innovation as a path to market through channel alliance relationships, rather than the rather unsuccessful strategy of me knocking on individual doors. It's a huge part of our pitch to an investment audience.
Yeah. So the only thing I'd just say to that is, we've been talking about the open innovation like there's a complete light switch that's gone from one model to the other. More investment is going into open innovation, and that means there's an opportunity for disruptive change in all sectors. There still will be a need for venture capital. There still will be a need for share prices to drive the capital for the pharma companies. But how those will be obtained in the future, or how the market will look at this models is yet to be determined. Everybody's going to have to change. The other part of it is if you will, the good successes out of the current models will still need to be maintained as well. This isn't a complete 100% shift. This is trying some new models in areas. So there's still some very good work that's going on, some very good biotech development, some very good, if you will, I hate to use the word traditional, but proven successful ways of getting to drug development that still needs to be funded as well.
I'll take umbrage with that. When we say proven success, it means you won the lottery, right? If you look at all the indicators, cost going in, productivity coming out, biotech's been profitable in 2 years out of 30. And what we tend to do is look at individual stories and say success, but Rome is burning. And I think this is a shift. It's happened in all industries. It's going to happen in this industry. The fundamental market forces that fund R&D are not sustainable. They've never been, and we just keep charging more for drugs and extending patent life, right? So,
and not to
push back, go
exactly,
for it.
There you go. It depends how you define success. So if we define success as a compound that goes to a marketed drug, then you're right. We have very poor success everywhere. If you define success as incremental development, incremental scientific advancement, incremental business development, the training of the new leaders, to use Affinium, look at the number of excellent chemists and leadership that have come out of there that have gone on to build other ventures on top of that experience. So it depends how you define success, but I think the biotech community needs to be defined on a broader success than did I win the jackpot on my one compound that made it through.
Well, I think the investors define success as earnings per share.
Yeah.
You know, which is the harsh reality. And also, when you use the Rome analogy, I mean, if Rome is indeed burning, then join the other team. John.
First, let me say, I think this has really been a nice collection of views on open innovation. And I have a comment and a question. First, I want to congratulate Michael on taking a stab at defining what open innovation is. But I'm struck through this discussion that there's a number of different breeds of open innovation. We talk about innovation networks where the proceeds are really proprietary to the members of the network. Neil spoke of an example in the mining industry where a prize network is set up, but there's a sole beneficiary of that open innovation process at the end. And then, of course, we have what's going on with SGC, where the results are freely available to all. So I see some really distinct differences in here depending upon whether the results are freely available or whether they're proprietary to the group that works on it. So here's my question. Focusing on the open innovation model where the results are freely available to all, I'm curious about the leadership aspects of this. How do you effectively coordinate, guide, set the parameters for essentially a process and a group of individuals who are doing things that benefit not just themselves, but a wider community? Who owns it? Who drives it? Where should that leadership come from? Comments?
Yeah, who polices it?
So you're talking about the SGS model, where everything is completely unprotected and delivered to the industry?
Yeah, that's a good example. Can those leaders, for example, come from industry, or is it necessarily something that you have people coming from academia or the public sector because of the more, you could argue, altruistic nature of the exercise?
I mean, I guess I go back to my definition of open innovation. It's collaborative, and the end result has to be a non-zero sum gain, which means everyone has to benefit. And if everyone understands what they're benefiting, and if someone can articulate those benefits and can rally the troops behind it, it's happened since time began, this type of a model. You know, what's happening, I think, in pharma and other industries is this zero-sum competitive model where people take from other people and ultimately both work together to drive the overall evolution and innovation. You know, that complete open system, I think, just depends on collaboration and everyone benefiting. I think I'm dodging your question, but.
Oh, well, Aled, I mean, you are the CEO of this consortium, so
But
what's it
you're the
like?
leader, actually.
I think nobody goes into the industry we're in without a little bit of altruism at the beginning. We want to make a difference. And so there are many ways to make a difference, and people don't go to work to make money. They go to work to get fulfilled, to feel happy about themselves, and to feel like they're contributing to society and to get better at what they do. And so if you set up an organization in which people can meet those objectives, be it open or closed, they'll be happy in their work there. You know what's off, and you'll be highly successful. So whether it's open or closed, or for financial gain, or for academic pursuits, it's the same drivers that drive people, and all you need to do is to make an organization that does that, and then it's not so hard.
Yeah. Okay, Pam?
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Orange, and I'm the founder of a very, very, very small startup called Dot Friday, so I really appreciated the Infonaut perspective and story. My question, though, is for the other three gentlemen, and that is whether you see the shift towards more open models of innovation and more collaboration actually helping encourage research in rare diseases or orphan diseases, or whether you think at the end of the day the drive will still be to produce drugs and treatments that are profit-oriented.
Why don't you guys start on?
So we interact very often with the smaller diseases in the Genetic Alliance, which is an umbrella organization. And indeed, yes, pharma justifiably focuses on diseases for which the markets are larger. A couple of companies, including Pfizer, have opened rare disease parts of their organizations, and the hope is that the pathways that are hit by rare diseases, in humans anyway, will be used in other larger market areas. So they're trying to create a business case for rare diseases. But I think it's a little wimpy of us to blame pharma for something. In the development of new medicines, I mean, the public sector heavily outfunds pharma. We spend about $110 billion per year around the world in biomedical research. There may be 80 to 90. So we should take responsibility for looking at these diseases ourselves and not shift the blame to only one part of the larger, partnerships. And we're also the shareholders of pharma too. So I think we got to take it upon ourselves as citizens to fund the kind of research that and don't blame industry for it. And that takes some leadership on the public sector side, I would say, not industry side.
I've got a perspective, I think, for a small company and the focus required. One of the challenges for us early on is essentially what we're doing is capturing time and space in a hospital, and that can be used for, it can either be floor wax or dessert topping and everything in between. And so we've been focused to move over to the dessert topping because it's a niche for us, and getting involved in other companies. If we were dealing with some things that they were already working on or already delivering, regardless how efficient we were, we wouldn't really have attracted the same perspectives. And there's a story I heard a little while ago. I've told it so often, I kind of put myself in the story now. W.P. Kinsella was an author who was giving us a lecture to a large audience. This, one of the questions from the audience was, you're obviously very passionate about baseball and North American Indians. Can you describe where that passion comes from and how it translates into your writing? And he said, well, I was a writer in Vancouver. I wasn't making any money and wrote a story about baseball and somebody bought it, so I wrote another one. And then I wrote a story about the North American natives, and that sold, so I wrote another one. Then I combined them two, and that sold really well. And he said, but I had to be like a miner who finds his vein of gold. And as soon as I found that vein of gold, I started mining. And he's become a very successful author, and in writing's his passion, and it just sort of the subject within there is something that he found through that process. And I think that is true for a lot of entrepreneurs. You go in with a wide scope of what you can do. You find out what you're good at and what you can be competitive at and what you can deliver to the industry and what actually attracts those partners in. And that's why we're working with global players today. I couldn't go to them with something that's marginally better than what they're already doing. I had to show them a different niche and a different market. And I think that's the role of a lot of small companies that then sort of develop that disruptive innovation within that niche and that vision.
Okay, Thomas.
Yeah, just wanted to throw out some comments here, more as food for thought and thinking about maybe how creative structures could be brought around it. But one thing that's really struck me where I've looked at this is how enormously wasteful is our entire drug development process. By the time, hear time and time again from the stories of these things that, drug that failed in phase 3. Well, by the time it's actually failed in phase 3 is probably the point in time when you know most about how it could have been used properly, how the trial could have been structured differently, the patient population stratified, that type of thing. And that's the point where you throw it away. Typically driven by the patent life. It's too late in the patent life. You can't come back and come at this away again. If you're in NASA, this is the equivalent of putting all the engineering into building a rocket. It blows up on the launch pad. So then you throw away all of your engineering, all your diagrams, fire all the people, and start again and build a new rocket. It's a system that's just enormously wasteful. And then we look at the other side of it. It's Pfizer laying off thousands and thousands of people with tremendous expertise and knowledge around these specific molecules, around the drugs in general, and you're letting them just dissipate. How can we bring this together within some sort of new model and actually get better treatments out of it?
So maybe if I can, so I'm hoping we don't lay off any more people, I'm hoping the line stops now because my job could be next on the line, so I agree with you there. But just to challenge the model a little bit, by the time it gets to phase 3, so as Al had mentioned earlier, you have data exclusivity. So even if your patent is expired, if you're doing the work to bring a new molecule to market, you do get a period of data exclusivity. So it's not the patent quite often which will prevent you from bringing it to market. If you come up with a learning in phase 3, quite often you have backup compounds that you could repatent, you could redo a phase 3. So you have to do so if you come up with a learning, wow, if we just would have done this earlier, we could have had a great molecule. You can go back and do that and still get your market exclusivity. I think what stops us from doing that, though, and I'll take we've got neuropathic pain as a debilitating condition. We have had, I'd say, 8 failures since I've been with Pfizer in 14 years in molecules down either 6-8 dehydrogenase or aldose reductase inhibitors to try and look at coming up with a solution for this. We keep failing. And every time we do, we go back and say, geez, what are we missing? Probably what we're missing, though, to your point of the model, is having a broader look at that data, a broader look at the science understanding and advancing it with others outside of just our scientific community. And we bring in external advisors, but we're not really engaging the research community around what's the gap that we're missing.
So I'm
Exactly.
terribly...
If I could just comment on that too. I mean, within the academic tech transfer office, I see academic researchers coming to me all the time and they say, I know why that drug failed. And it's because of this new research and this new pathway. We now know why that didn't work. And so, yeah, it's interesting to kind of see those two coming together.
So drug repositioning is another fun area.
Very brief comment, Michael.
I was going to say one of the clear open innovation projects that CCRM will move forward is a consortium of pharma companies using cell-based predictive assays to look at drugs that are in that position for further application and to understand, with these human cell-based novel assays, what the industry can get out of value, in terms of value out of those in repositioning or repurposing. So I think that there are projects like that underway.
Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we're over time, and I'm getting the signal we're going to have to cut it off. I'd like to thank Mark Lundy, Michael May, Niall Wallace, and Aled Edwards. I'm very sorry about that. And thank you all for coming. Please have a look at marsdd.com. You can find the white paper associated with this event, and you can read the comments and input from our distinguished faculty today. And thank you all very much.